Great, welcome back to the video series on Unreal Engine 4. In this video, we're going to take a look at building a first-person character and walking around in our space, building all the blueprints and putting all the little technology together. It's fairly simple to do, but there's a lot of little items that have to be taken into account, so let's get started. In this section, we're going to, well, in the previous section, we created in basic environment. We put in a sky sphere and lighting and so forth, and we added some textures to a floor, and it looks decent. We're going to make it look better as time goes by. But for now, what we want is a character so we can actually play the game. If I go in here and I click play right now, I can't really do anything. I can move around a little bit, but I'm just kind of like flying, and I bump into things. I'm just a camera. And I really can't do anything. So we want a player character. So to create that, the first thing I'm going to do is go in here to content, and I'm going to create a couple folders. I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it characters. And under characters, I'm going to create a new folder called player. I called it characters because we're going to create some non-player characters in the future, and we'll put those all under there in their own folders with all the things that they need. That's how I like to organize it. Some people organize things differently. They have like a general blueprints folder and materials folder. These folders up here, materials and textures, are like the global stuff that's going to be used everywhere. These will have their own types of stuff under them. So with the player folder selected, I'm going to right click in this folder and select blueprint class. What we want right now is a character. We'll get into this other stuff later, and there's classes down here. We can create blueprints on all kinds of stuff or based on all kinds of stuff, but what we right now want is a character. And we're going to type this in. We're going to call it FP for first person player underscore BP. The BP is for blueprint, just keeps it separate. And with that created, we're going to double click it, and it'll open up this blueprint editor. And the nice thing about this is it's already got a capsule component and an arrow and a character movement. So we inherited all of that from our character class that we derived it from. That character class that we selected put all this stuff in here for us, so we don't need to assemble it. Otherwise, we would have to assemble these things. But it is missing one thing, and that one thing that it's missing is a camera. And we want to attach that camera to this capsule component. So let's go in here and click on Add Components, and we'll just, for simplicity, type in camera. And there it is, right there. Okay. And we're just going to call this main camera. Now we want the camera to be like at the top of his head, right up in here somewhere, and maybe pull it forward a little bit. Let me explain a few things about this. This part here is called the capsule. It's the collider. It bumps into stuff and it can't pass through other colliders and things. Okay, it's also the root component of this. Everything is based on it. This arrow says what direction that the person's walking in. That's this arrow component here. You don't see that in game. You'll only see it in the editor and in this mode here, so that we can see that the camera is looking in the direction that he will be walking. And just like the main editor, we can fly around in this. Oh, and let me point out one other thing here about flying around. So what I'm doing is I'm holding the right mouse button, and I'm using the WASD keys to move, very similar to the way I would move in a game. But I'm moving a little fast for this particular scene. That control is right here where it says camera speed. I can turn that down a little bit. Let's turn it down to 2 and see how we move. Now we move much more slowly, and we can move around this thing more easily and see it. Kind of a cool looking camera model. You don't see this in game either. This is really just an icon. a very fancy icon, but it says that that's the camera, and that's what we're going to be viewing through. So we've got our camera installed. We've got our capsule component and an arrow, and there is an empty mesh down here which can be used for a variety of things. So let's compile this. When you compile a blueprint, you're compiling what that you're compiling everything in that blueprint, and this blueprint has a number of other things, and these construction script and event graph, we will get to these and build events in here to cause the character to do different things. For now, this is all we need. What we need next is we need some input controls. Alright, so what we're going to do is go up to settings, and we're going to select project settings, and that opens up this window. And there's a whole ton of settings in here. We'll be dealing with various ones from time to time. I'm not going to go over all this stuff. I'm going to tell you what you're interested in here is where it says engine. You come straight down through this, and here is input. This, click on this, and this opens up this panel which shows these input mappings. What input mappings are is they give us a convenient way to take any kind of input into the system and give it a unique name so that we can use it in our game without having to use the specific thing. And so, for instance, if I want W to mean move forward, I can create an input mapping that says W means moving forward right here. And then if I use move forward throughout the game, wherever I need the move forward command, if I want to change that sometime in the future, I only have one place to change it, which is right here. So we've got action mappings and axis mappings. Let's begin by creating some very simple axis mappings, which is ones you're probably familiar with. I'm going to click this plus right here and then open up this arrow that appeared. And here's the first one, and I'm going to call it move forward. Okay, I'm going to open it up also, and here it says none, and I can decide what it is. So it's going to be from the keyboard, and it's going to be the W key. So if we just scroll right down here, there's the W key. The W key is now mapped to the name move forward, and I put a space in there, and I think I need to not have a space in there. And we can scale this if we want to. We're going to leave it as it is for now. I'm going to go through here and create move right. I've got move forward, and now I'm going to have move right. So move forward is something that contains both W and S. So let's put also the key S under here. I forgot about this. So let me back up and re-explain this. So move forward is mapped now to W and S, and S is what we want to press when we want to move backward. And so our scale here needs to be -1. And what that will tell the controller is when we get a move forward command, it could be either 1 or -1. Now, this is an axis mapping. This could also be mapped to a game controller, in which case it might be 1 and -1 for the maximum, but this would give values in between so you could control the speed of the character. For now, we're just going to be working with the keyboard, so it's going to be full forward or full reverse is the only thing that we're going to handle. And we could add other things in here like game pads and so forth. So that handles that. Let's close this up and come up here to axis mappings and click this again. And we'll call this one move right. So to move right, we want to use the D key. So we'll go down to keyboard again and select the D key. And then we'll add another mapping to this one because we also want to add the A key. So go keyboard, A, select that. Now if positive is move right, our D key, we called it move right, so a +1 we're going to move to the right. The A, we want that to be a -1, so we move to the left. So move right in this case could mean move right or left. And we could change this and name it move right, left, or move forward, back, or something along those lines. But move forward and move right are the standard ones. So this will get us moving around once we program them in. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So what we're going to do is go ahead and close this. There's no save button or anything. We just close this. The project settings are set. And we've got our blueprint. I think I need to save that blueprint. So now what we're going to open up is this, with this first person character open, we're going to go over here to the construction script, I think. No, we don't need to do anything with the construction script yet. What we need is the event graph. So we'll just go to the event graph, and we're not going to use these preset events at the moment. So we can always add these in. I'm going to, what did I do here? I left clicked and dragged across them, and that selected them just like your typical box select on most programs. And then I'm just going to tap the delete key and get rid of those because we don't need them. All I'm interested in at the moment is my axis controls. So if I right click in this designer here for our event graph, this is where we're creating a blueprint now. We're creating a blueprint that's going to tell it what we want to do when we press these keys. So I want that input axis called move forward. So I'm just going to type in move forward, and we get a couple of them here. We get this thing here is called a function. We don't want the function, we want the diamond, which is the event. So it says axis events and axis values. We can get the value of it, and if we were using a controller, we might need that value. But what we want right now is the move forward event. And so we've got that. And we're going to go right down below this and right click and type in move right and click the same thing, the diamond with the move right event. Okay? Now, we need a couple of extra things. So we need to get a hold of our first person camera. So what we want to do is come up here. We called it main camera. I'm going to go ahead and rename this just for convenience. I'm going to call it first person camera. You can rename that just by double clicking, just by clicking on it. Now I went to that camera. We'll go back here to the event graph. What we want to do is drag off this first person camera. We can just drag it right from here and drop it down, and now we get this. Now we have access to things that are in that first person camera, and what we're interested in is a getter. So what this is it represents an object, and we can get values out of this object, and we get them by dragging off here and typing get, and what we want is forward vector. So this will get the forward vector. Now, this value coming out here represents a vector. It's actually 3 values. In fact, we can go in here and right click on this and say split struct pins, and here you'll see that we get a return value X, Y, and Z. So it's a single value. A vector is a single value that contains multiple components. In this case, it contains the X, Y, and Z. So I can go here and I can recombine the struct pins because that's all we want right at the moment. I'm going to be talking about vectors in a little bit more detail, and I'm also going to give you resources of where you can learn a little bit more about linear algebra. I know it sounds scary, but you really don't need to learn the kind of linear algebra that you might have seen in school. What you need is a few conceptual things about it. I'm going to point you to some excellent YouTube videos given by some excellent teachers on linear algebra and the concepts behind them and how they work with graphical representations that you can go view if you want. I'm not going to go into that much detail, but I will tell you a little bit about vectors, matrices, and other things as we work with various kinds of transforms throughout the course. This is the forward vector of this camera. It is the direction in which the camera is pointing, which is the direction we want to move in. We also want to get another value here. We're going to right click and type in get actor forward vector. Okay? Now, so actually, we can use either one of these for our purposes. I'm going to go ahead and delete this camera one, and we're just going to get the actor forward vector. That's all we need. What we need here is an add movement component. Add movement input rather. Add movement input, and I'll explain how this works. So we've got this. We've got our actor forward vector. This is the direction in the world in which our actor, our a player character, this first-person player character that we just created, it's a direction that character's pointed in the world. Okay. This is the event of pushing the W key or the S key, either one, and that's what this axis value is here. This add movement input is a node that says we're going to start moving the character forward or backward. It tells the character to do that by communicating with it. In these nodes, in Blueprint nodes, there are value nodes like this one here that just contain a value, and there's this triangle with a white line that comes off of it. This is called the execution node. Or the execution line or the execution path, whatever you want to call it in that regard. We take this and hook it over to here. Whenever this event occurs, this will fire this and make this execute. We're going to add some movement to the character. And what it needs to know is what direction it wants us to go, which is this world direction right here. If we hook it up to this axis value, this tells this what direction to go in, and then there's a scale value, and the scale value actually comes off of this axis value right here, and we plug it into there. So what happens is when we push the W key or the S key, this axis value will be 1 or -1. It'll go add this movement input. So let's see what perhaps happens here. However, we need a couple more things. So we're gonna go with this right now and see how forward and back works. So we're gonna compile this, save it, and we want to open up those. Okay, so now that we've got our player, we got to do this. We got to right click, and we're going to right click and add a blueprint class. And what we want now is a game mode base. And we're just going to call this FP game mode. And we're going to open up this game mode class and go to the... Okay, so we opened up the game mode class, go to class defaults, and over here we've got this player default pawn class. We want this default pawn class to be our FP. Oh, I spelled that wrong. We got to fix that. FP player BP. And then in project settings, game mode. This is game mode base right now, but we want it to be FP game mode. All right. That was a little bit confusing, and I personally always do get confused by this. It's kind of an initial setup thing. You need to hook your player together to hook it into the game properly. Those things aren't supposed to pop up when I'm recording. Okay. What this amounts to is the system now, the project, knows about this game mode that we just created here. And this game mode knows about our player controller and our where is it? Down here, our FP player BP, which I'm going to rename. And that's what ties it to the game and tells it how to send signals to it. That's the best way I can explain it. It hooks them all together so that it knows what we're trying to work with. So that game mode is taken care of there, and the character's taken care of there, and hopefully if we play now, we end up, nope. Okay, it did hook it up, but it hooked up in a weird place. I think what we need to do is, we've got a player start. Where's our player start? There's our player start. Okay. Oh, I haven't hooked up the mouse to it yet, which is why. Okay, it appears that we are hooked up and we are going to the player start, because before I hooked that up, we were able to just move around. Now we're anchored to our player start, which is good. We know that it's hooking up to this thing now. I want to keep this from falling through the floor. There, it's a little bit above it. Okay, so here's this. We now need to hook up our mouse. So we need to go back to our project settings and back down here to input under engine input, and we're going to have to add some mouse operations here. And that's going to be turn and look up. Well, turn and turn and look up. So we'll add another axis mapping, and we'll call this turn. And the X on the mouse is when you're moving right to left. So that's what we want the mouse to do. We want the mouse X-axis to be our turn. And we'll add another input mapping, and we'll call it look up. And we want this to be the mouse Y. So that's done. We can close that, and we can go back to our first-person blueprint. All right. We can't tell much about this movement going on here until we get to where we can look around. So what we need to do now is look around. So that's here. And we've got a couple more. Well, I haven't done the move right yet. We'll get to that. Well, I'm going to get moving around first. So now I'm going to go turn. And here's our event that we created called turn. And look up. And here's our event for look up. Those are our two things. And these are really simple. We're going to go input controller yaw. Add controller yaw, rather. Add controller roll, pitch, and yaw. We want yaw. Yaw is right to left, so that's our turn. Again, we hook up the execution path. We hook up the value here to this val. Oh, did I need to? Well, we'll check it out. I might need to make some adjustments to that. And then we want add controller pitch. And pitch is up and down. Looking up and looking down. That's pitch. So yaw is rotating right, left. Pitch is looking up and down. And roll is rolling side to side, but we're not going to get involved in that. We want to hook up our axis value to the axis value. And now let's see if things work. I'm going to hit save all and try to do that fairly often. The engine doesn't crash too much anymore, but it does from time to time. And well, we've got our yaw, but it doesn't look like we're getting pitch for some reason. Why are we not pitching? Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, I missed one little tiny step here. In our FP Player Blueprint, FP Player BP, the first person camera, there's a little checkbox down here that says use pawn control rotation has to be checked. By default, it's off. We need to check that, compile, save. We go back here and hit play, and now our mouse is rotating, and we can move forward and we can move back. So our pawn is now working, our player pawn. And if we fall off the edge, we fall. And eventually, I think we hit something and die. Or the game quits. Maybe not. I don't think I put... Yeah, we didn't put that in there, so we have to fly back up. And I've got that set real slow, so let's move it up to 6. There we go. Whoa, now we're real fast. Okay, so we'll set it back down to slow. And now we can ease in here. Okay, so we have our player pawn working. Now there is something we can do. The floor is looking... the floor looks kind of nice, but we still got the tiling. We'll go over that in another video when we start working with more detailed textures. This initial part here is more introductory kind of stuff. Just want to get you a feel for the things you do. Let's go over our pawn blueprint now and see what we did. So what we've got is this input movement. We still have to do this axis. That's very simple. Okay. What we're going to do is add one second, just make sure that I'm saying the right thing here. For the move right, yes, so let's move these down a little bit. This is our right left thing. We're going to add a movement input again. Add movement input. Here's another add movement input. We're going to bring this execution path into the add movement input execution. We're going to take the value into the scale value, just like that. Oh, and I did decide to go with the first-person camera and the vector, but the difference is, and we can just copy this, you can hit Control D with something selected. Is it Control D for duplicate? Oh no, I'm sorry, W to duplicate. Control W, Control W, sorry. Hotkey for that to duplicate is Control W. I'll delete that. You can also just select it, hit Control C, Control V if you're more comfortable with that. We need the first person camera. We need to get, in this case, however, we need to get the right vector. So explain a couple of things about those two vectors. The forward vector is the direction that the character is facing. The right vector is 90 degrees to the right of where the character is facing. It's a vector that specifically points in the direction you're facing or to the right of what you're facing. So we want the right vector because this is the move right event. And if we plug that into the world direction, it will move us in that direction when we use the A and D key, the A key being negative, so it'll move us to the left. So let's see if we can strafe now with the pawn character. And here's my, oops, got to click in there. Here's my forward movement, backward movement. Okay, strafe right, strafe left. We have those. I can rotate, so I can move in any direction by rotating my forward vector. So my forward vector is always pointing in the direction I'm looking, and it's coming right off the camera. So wherever the camera is pointing, that's where I'm going. So that's a basic first-person character. In the next video, I think we'll start by building a HUD for this guy. So we're going to put some 2D stuff on the screen. We're going to make some simple little textures using GIMP. We're going to make those by hand. We're going to stick them up here on the screen and show how we can start building a player HUD for this character. and I will see you in the next video. All right, thanks for watching. That's the end of this video. If you like the video, please hit that like button. If you really liked it, push the subscribe button and keep track of what I'm doing. And if you want to get notices about when I upload a new video, hit that notify button. It's the little bell next to the subscribe button. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.